All right, what's up, guys? I am here with Standing for Truth. Looks like a lot of you know him and are waiting for him. So I'm going to give him a chance to say what's up and tell you about his channel.
Hey, man. Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Just a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, I did that again. I always forget to mute my channel, so it was blasting my headphones. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
No problem, brother. I appreciate you having me on. Looks like you've been having some good discussions on your channel. I look forward to a good discussion. People can check out my channel. There's a few fellow creationists. I think one's in the chat named Raw Matt. We've got a book together that you can certainly look up. I think he's willing to provide it to anybody for free. Lots of good information on there. And over the last week, we've been working hard on some videos addressing Aaron Ra and his phylogeny challenge, phylogenetic systematics. We might get a little bit into that today. But yeah, you can check out my channel if you're interested. You can subscribe if you don't agree with me, but you just want to see where I'm coming from. You can subscribe as well. So once again, I appreciate you having me on, brother.
Oh yeah, no problem. And I don't have a link to his channel in the description. So after the conversation, I'll go in and I'll edit that in so you guys can have that link and go right to his channel and check him out. I want to say Standing for Truth was the first person that ever emailed me asking to do a conversation. And this was way back in August, I think, when I first got the first email. So I was still extremely, really small. Like, I'm still small, but I was like maybe like a couple hundred subscribers when he first emailed me. So he's been wanting to have this conversation. I kind of ignored it because at that point I wasn't doing Hangouts. I didn't even have the option available on my channel. So I kind of ignored it. And then when I started doing Hangouts, I sent him an email. It's like, let's do this. I saw him in Skylar's chat, and I think this is going to be interesting. So I'm going to let him, you can ask me whatever you want to ask me or start the conversation, however you'd like to start it. I think it's fair to let the guest start.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. I think I'll just start it off simple and easy, probably something that's going to help us better understand each other and help the audience understand a little better where we're coming from, because especially if a decent portion of our discussion is going to be based on biblical creation, evolutionary theory, and things like this. I think it's important to understand where we're coming from as in defining terms. So even if we use the word evolution, so that word might come up quite a few times, I think it's important that we understand like what it means. And I think it can have many different meanings, whether it's change over time or a change in allele frequency in populations or gene pool over time or over generations. What would be your definition of say evolution in regards to change?
I would say I have a very generalized view of evolution. I believe pretty much what I was taught in school. It makes sense to me. So I believe that there was a progression of change, mutation, adaptation. I believe that evolution pretty much centers around reproduction. So it's going to evolve a creature to reproduce at a maximum effect for survival. I don't really have clear definitions of it. Like I said, I kind of told him a little bit off air right before we came on, and something that I've tried to explain is that I don't really have a formal education in evolution. I just believe in it, and I'm not afraid to talk about it. So I mean, yeah, I guess I would just have the Americanized version. You know, I generally just believe it because it makes more sense than the other story.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your response. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, that type of micro evolutionary variation, let's say, where you get a change in the frequency of the expression of different traits, I don't think that that's really disputed. So, if we're both in agreement that evolution means a change over time, or biological evolution, a change in allele frequency in gene pool over time, then we're not going to have much to disagree on, because I think that type of evolution certainly explains the survival of the fittest. Just like you said, mutations, natural selection acting upon random mutations, random variation. I just don't think that type of evolution, if that's what we're going to agree on, I don't think that that's going to explain the arrival of the fittest, right? Because evolution, the best way I can put it, I think, in regards to what we know about the genome now, it's going to have to explain how the four-dimensional genome with multiple overlapping codes and chock full of meta information came about. So I think a good way to progress this conversation is to ask you about limits. Like, do you believe that there's limits? Do you believe there's a barrier to the change? For example, if I use, let's say, a dog, do you believe that, you can get a dog say as big as a whale? Because we know there's animals as big as a whale, like a whale. Or do you believe you can get a dog as, say, small as a mouse? Because they're both mammals, and we know there's animals as small as a mouse, like a mouse. Like, do you believe there's a limit to the change, whether it's physical, genomic? Go ahead.
I am not. Let me think. I think that I think that see, I don't want to say that there is a limit to it, because I really don't understand. Let me think of the best way to word this. So what are you talking about with a limit? Like like a dog the size of a mouse? I think if scientists wanted to do that, they probably could.
I think because obviously we've agreed that evolution means, say, a change over time, or in regards to biological evolution, a change in allele frequency in populations over time. But that type of evolution explains the small scale variation that we see, but I don't think it explains the major innovations, the major origin events, say the major origin events of new major forms of life. So that's why because we agree mutations and natural selection are obviously the mechanisms behind this change, but I think our disagreements would be that I would say mutations and natural selection lack significant creative powers. So if we're looking at these new innovations, structures, body plans, and I think novel information, that's what's important. I don't believe empirical science tells us that those can be the result of natural selection acting upon random variation and random mutation. So if universal common ancestry is true, there might be soft limits, but at the end of the day, I think it's safe to say that the change would be limitless, right? Because if we're going to go from, say, a single-celled organism to a multi-celled organism to a fish to an amphibian to a reptile to a mammal to a bird to a monkey to a man, there's going to be a lot of change there. And not just the change we see within, say, domestic dogs, but a whole new novelty of change. So I think if we can't get it, because we see a variety of dogs, but if we're not going to get a dog as big as a whale, but yet we know there's animals as big as a whale, maybe the best way to ask you, do you believe dogs, whales, and mice are related through common ancestry?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, all right, so I kind of see where you're getting at. And yeah, I'm seeing some responses in the chat, and it's kind of like what I was thinking. Just my natural idea would be that the limitations for evolution would be based upon the environment of the time. Now, so you're trying to dismiss the fact that science says that we started as a single-celled organism, and how can a single-celled organism make all of these, and it has to be God. But the one thing that I have seen is scientific data. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know what the scientific data means or says, but I have actually seen scientific data backing up that progression. What I've never seen is any type of empirical data saying God did it.
Well, I think if I look to actually, before I get to the biblical model version of say evolutionary change, I should just ask you an upfront, honest question. Like, in regards to what we just talked about there, if we see dogs producing a variety of dogs, mice producing a variety of mice, and say whales producing a variety of whales, do you think that it's empirical science to say dogs, elephants, and whales are all related through common ancestry? Or do you think that's something that requires a bit of faith to accept? Go ahead, brother.
No, I think that there's evidence to accept it. There's actual evidence. You can see the progression. You can see the fossil record. It's there. Now, you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to come to the same conclusions that they come based upon it, but there is actual evidence. You can see it. You can look at it. You can dismiss it, or you can accept it. That is a huge difference between, you know, saying that a supernatural figure sprouted up all the, you know, I have a much easier time believing that they all came from one thing. And I mean, I do believe that because science, it is pretty much shown that. I have a much easier time believing that we all have just progressed from that it's a natural evolution, than a supernatural figure at the beginning of time creating a whole universe just so this speck of a dust of the planet that we live on is just a speck of a dust in the universe. Not even a speck of it's like an atom in the universe. That one little atom in this vast universe is going to be so vitally important. I've seen no evidence of that.
Okay, I think that being said, then, you know, at least now we know where, you know, where we're coming from, where we are going to disagree. So obviously, if by, you know, the word evolution you mean dogs and wolves are related through common ancestry, then obviously that's not the issue, then is what I'm gathering here. And then obviously, you know, that's verified through empirical science. But I think it's just when you say that by evolution, you know, you mean dogs and banana plants, or dogs and whales are related through common ancestry, and then there's actual evidence for that, then, you know, obviously that's where we're gonna disagree. But I think in regards to a biblical version, because I know you said, you know, God did it, is not a valid explanation, but science, empirical science, I think the gold standard of it, obviously science means to know. How do we know? Testing, observations, investigations, observations, but the gold standard is testable and falsifiable predictions. So if you were to put yourself in the, you know, biblical creation starting point, do you think, you know, God intended the command, you know, when he says to be fruitful and multiply, to be by cloning? Like, do you think that would be a valid inference based on his command? For you, I know you don't believe the Bible, but just to put yourself into that.
Yeah. Just if I were to take God at his command, and if he's saying be fruitful, multiply, I wouldn't have a problem with cloning. Like, if from a God perspective, I would think that would be the most efficient way, especially if you want strong humans. You can make them strong humans. You know, you can mess with their DNA. You can do whatever you have to do to improve that human. Why not?
But if by, you know, be fruitful and multiply, he meant to do it through cloning, each generation is just going to be like, let's say Adam and Eve, for example, then you're just going to have exact copies of Adam and Eve. So you're not going to have any variation. It just doesn't seem like it would make sense for God to design us.
Well, I guess I would have to say, then, I mean, he should make sense of it. Don't be so don't be so vague. You're the master of the universe. Use your words, and say that. Say, have sex, have marriage, have sex between a man and a woman, you know, but he doesn't clarify these things. So for being the ruler of the universe, he seems pretty dumb.
Well, because I think where I'm going with this is that we look to, you know, created heterozygosity. That's kind of just a fancy word for created genetic diversity. But that just means that, you know, Adam and Eve weren't created to produce clones, that they were actually created with pre-existing DNA differences.
Yeah, but he didn't specify that. He just said be fruitful and multiply. So if you're going to be fruitful and multiply without a specification, then do it which way you can. And I don't think that, I mean, an exact clone, who knows if they would be an exact replica. But I mean, so what you're talking about is that free will is what's going to come into play. That's basically what you're getting into is, you know, our free will, our different DNA, we're different from everybody else. But if he just wants us to be fruitful and multiply, then by that standard, as a person that's going to go by the word of God, I would have to take him at his words for what they are, not for what I would have them be up here. He said, be fruitful and multiply. So if the easiest way to do that is to clone, why not?
Well, I think if I, you know, corresponded or related to, you know, our differences in change, because it just sounds like, you know, a limit to the change, a barrier to the change is kind of where we disagree. But since I agree that there's change, since I agree that there's variation, what I'm saying is if we use that inference based on being fruitful and multiplying based on reproducing, you know, after the same kind, and I'm invoking, say, pre-existing DNA differences, because if we have these heterozygous ancestors, you know, an almost limitless variety of, say, combinations of, you know, chromosomes, genes, and traits are possible. But because science, like you said, you can't just say God did it. Science has to be testable and falsifiable, which means we would have to have evidence for that, right? And where I'm going with that is we would expect then, if we're looking at the DNA, we would expect that if God, you know, created the original kinds, Adam and Eve, with these created functional DNA differences, we'd expect the vast majority of our genome to be functional. And the main view throughout the years has been, you know, the majority is actually non-functional leftovers through evolutionary processes. In other words, junk. Have you heard of the junk DNA era? Like, are you familiar with that?
No, never heard of it.
So I guess where I'd be going with that is if we're looking at, say, this hypothesis that God created pre-existing DNA differences, but we actually look at, you know, genomic data of recent, and it's not contested that there's ENCODE. What they did is they looked at DNA sequences for functionality, and they actually found that 80% of, because we have non-coding DNA and protein coding DNA, it's the non-coding DNA that was largely thought to be non-functional. And through these experiments, and it's secular evolution is doing the experiments, they've discovered that this non-coding DNA is transcribed into RNA. So that suggests function. It's preliminary because they have to do comprehensive gene knockout experiments to know for sure what these functions are. But my whole point is this data that really the secular scientists are doing for us is confirming our view on Genesis and bringing forth. So it seems like the creationist view at this point is testable and falsifiable, because if the vast majority of our DNA sequences were non-functional, that would falsify our hypotheses. Does that make sense?
Maybe to a scientist. So yeah, you're speaking in fancy terms and all that. I don't see how anything science has done could do anything to convince you that Genesis was true. Because I mean, science is everything that I've seen has demonstrated that Genesis, I mean, is a complete fiction. I mean, we have the fossil record that shows that. I mean, 6,000 years ago, that there were civilizations. There wasn't two people in a garden.
Well, even if we look at, say, the fossil record in a lot of these,
or not just the fossil record though, but we have, I mean, Samaria, the city of Samaria was 10,000 years ago, and it's dug up. We have that city now. You know, it's not just fossils. I mean, there is overwhelming evidence that Yeah, Genesis is wrong. If God, and now God might be right. I don't think your God is right, but a God might be right, and a
Well,
God might have done it all, you know. But he didn't do it 6,000 years ago.
A lot of these civilizations, though, like for example, if you use the Egyptian chronology, there's actually evidence that these pharaohs have now ruled in overlapping ways. So the whole Egyptian chronology is actually being rethought, and it actually fits a 6,000-year timescale. And a lot of the, like for example, human writing and human records really only goes back 4,000 to 6,000 years. So if you're looking at these, you know, Sumerian civilizations and stuff, a lot of those are based on indirect evidence and inference. So if you're looking at, you know, dating methods and things like that, but the actual written records, the actual records of human civilizations that we can directly correlate actually only goes back 4,000 to 6,000 years. You can actually Google that. So a lot of what you're talking about, you'd actually have to look at dating records, and we know that there's assumptions there. But since you brought up like just fossils in general, like do you look at, say, you know, Homo neanderthal, Homo erectus, Australopithecus, Afarenses, you know, Lucy, like are you talking about these? You look at those and you're correlating that to, say, human evolution, for example?
Well, that's a fossil record of a primitive human, yes, but no, on what I'm talking about, and you can say, wow, yeah, you can say that. I've never seen any evidence to support any of the things that you just said. I know about the writings in Sumeria, and yeah, those writings go back at least 10,000 years. I think we developed written language.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. 1,000 years. Yeah. I said about 4,000 to 6,000 years is
I said
the earliest
10,000 years, 10,000 years, not 1,000.
10,000 years would be things that you would have to, like, for example, stuff that take assumptions. But the actual written records, the earliest written records that we have, well, actually, the records we have is that all civilizations came about abruptly. Languages came about abruptly. It's almost like there's a stasis with no actual evolutionary progression. And everything I said about the Egyptian chronology, I mean, that's even being acknowledged by secular Egyptologists, if that's what you call it.
I've never heard of that, but even take away Sumeria, we found older civilizations. Now we found pyramids off the coast of China, I believe, that dates back 40 to 50,000 years.
Well,
I mean,
well, that's exactly what my point is that the things you're talking about require assumptions and inferences based on, say, carbon dating, based on
actual science,
the pyramids. But,
actual science, not a book.
What I'm inferring from is the actual written records. You know, that is a direct observation that you can conclude, okay, you know, the earliest written record is 4,000 to 6,000 years, but you have to go to, you know, a rock or a pyramid or something like that where there's assumptions built into it. But I think a direct observation genetically, because if you want to look at these, because you're talking about, you know, looking to the secular scientists, the evolutionary biologists, and I think that's a good thing. But even population geneticists, I'm not sure if you've heard of this term before, but genetic entropy, the accumulation of, you know, deleterious mutations, that actually puts a shelf life on genomes. So if you take that back in time to a point of least genetic entropy, that would be a point of creation. So that's actually consistent starting with a biblical framework. But if we're accumulating these deleterious, these destructive mutations, because you said earlier that mutations are the construction for evolution, but I'm saying, you know, mutations are destruction, not construction. So
I didn't say that. I said mutations, but I definitely didn't say that. I mean, you seem like you're very smart, and you're talking in all these scientific terms, and it's really throwing me off. Well,
are you familiar with genetic? Like, have you ever heard of genetic entropy before? The degradation of our genomes, like.
Yes, I've heard of it, but what I'm saying is this. All right.
I'm just saying that's consistent, because from the fall.
I mean, I just find it really weird that creationists have a different read of the science than 98% of the people, because I've never heard of any of the all right, so an atheist rationale in the chat made up a good point. Written language wasn't when language started, but we have we have hieroglyphics from ancient native peoples here in the Americas that would date back, and you dismiss the actual science.
Well, because that's based on
a written record. I don't get that at all. I don't get that at all. I mean, from what I have seen of the people studying the written record, they all agree that this earth is way older than 6,000 years old. All of them, unless you're like a creationist.
Well, because 98% of population geneticists are evolutionary population geneticists, and one population geneticist, Alexei Kondrashov, he said, why are we not dead, or why are we not extinct 100 times over? Because he recognizes that, I'm sure, I don't want to get too complicated here, but I'm sure you're familiar with mutation inheritance, and it's a fact. This is from secular population geneticists, not creationists. They're saying that we add new mutations at the first cell division. We primarily die to a mutation accumulation, and we inherit 100 to 300 new mutations per person per generation. So that's billions of new mutations just this generation. And are you familiar with the pandemic of Alzheimer's disease, dementia, autism, asthma, cancers? I'm sure you're familiar with that, but that's all readily explainable based on mutation accumulation.
But is it explainable? But is that any of that stuff explainable to your concept of God?
Absolutely, because after the fall, we'd expect decay, death. And if you look at the increased ages in the biblical text, we can directly correlate that to this accumulation of mutations. But what I'm saying is this genetic entropy.
You actually think that Noah was what, like 900 years old?
Oh, absolutely, because the Bible records the time when people had extremely long lives. Just like you said, I know you're scoffing at it, but
I'm just like, where do you get scientific data that any human being has ever lived that long? Ever? We're living longer than we've ever lived before, and we're lucky to see 85.
Well, the thing is, our maximum lifespan has not increased, but the average lifespan has because of medical intervention. But our maximum lifespan has not increased and probably won't increase, because we're seeing, because you brought up fossils, and I don't want to go on a rabbit trail. That's kind of what I want to talk about. But if you actually look, and there's secular data that I was looking at this today from evolutionary scientists, Neanderthal, for example, which evolutionists look at as a human common ancestor through evolution, is now showing evidence that they were highly inbred. They had high genetic load. Homo naledi, Homo erectus, they suffered from reductive evolution. That's why you see these features such as reduced body size, reduced, brain volume, and many pathologies. Also, mammoths had increased genetic load. Hobbits, I'm not sure if you're familiar with hobbits, another supposed human ancestor. The reason they look like that as well was because of reductive evolution. What this is it's deleterious mutation accumulation, but this evidence in the fossil record supports creation, because death and decay is exactly what we expect, and that's exactly what we find, is my point.
You're completely misrepresenting the science. What you're speaking of are hominids that were not human beings. They were not Homo sapiens. They were a different DNA strand. They were what didn't make it in evolution. We did, they didn't. What you're saying is just completely wrong and not backed up by any science at all.
No, actually, I've got the science papers here, for example.
Just Matt did too.
Well, for example, the data that I just said about Homo neanderthalensis, they're actually just human. Even the
hobbits were not. The hobbits were hominids. I have actually studied those in particular, and those were a different strain of hominid. They weren't us.
Okay, so Homo Floriensis, the hobbits, okay, the early human population that we know the evolutionists identify as hominids. That's true. But the thing is, for one, they only use 40% of the bones when they're actually doing their
So
data
now,
on that. That wouldn't pass in
here it is.
court.
Now we got to debunk the science to get to your creationism. You know, you got to debunk the dating. Now you got to debunk this. I mean, that's what you guys do because you can't get past the science.
Well, are you denying that the hobbits that you said you studied in depth, are you denying that they were highly inbred and suffered from genetic degeneration called reductive evolution that resulted in the dwarfing? Are you denying that?
I'm not. I don't know that. Maybe they were inbreeding with each other. I'm sure they were. But what I'm saying is they were not Homo sapiens. They were hobbits.
Because see, the thing is, you still have that evolutionary bias and assumption. Our model dictates death and decay due to mutation and accumulation. That's exactly
whose model?
Empirically.
Whose model?
The biblical base model. If we start with
biblical base model, that's what I'm saying. That's bullshit. It's completely wrong, and it has no science to back it up. You're not.
Even though I've been proving it. Even though I've been proving it for the last. Okay, how are you going to?
That's exactly what Matt Powell said, dude, and he didn't prove nothing. You haven't proved anything. All you've done is try to debunk science. That's all you've done.
No, I'm not debunking science because ENCODE, which you said you know nothing about, which I'm surprised even the layman should know that. That's revealing massive genome-wide functionality consistent with created heterozygosity. Genome-wide degradation.
I told you before we started this. I told you before we started this.
It's everywhere, brother.
All right. So I told you before we started this conversation, I've had no formal schooling in evolution. I only know what I've learned and what I learned in school. So when you're going to throw out words at me and I've never heard of them, or if they don't spark a thing in my brain to make me remember, I'm not going to pretend that I remember. What you're doing is just throwing out a bunch of shit, trying to sound smart, and you're not doing anything but throwing out a bunch of shit. Okay,
so, and I understand, you know what, if you admit that you're not too familiar with, you know, the evolutionary data, that's fine. All I'm saying is you're, you know, acknowledging that, you know, most scientists believe in evolution, but at the end of the day, you're not really providing any evidence for it. Like, for example, I
don't have to provide that. They have done that for you. Go look it up.
Actually, what they've done for me is actually disprove their own theory because population geneticists
if they had disproved their own theory, you would not be here trying to disprove their theory.
Well, because it's the primary axiom. They can't give it up. There's something called rescue devices. So for this genome-wide degradation, the inheritance of mutations, deleterious mutations, they've resorted to natural selection, beneficial mutations, adaptations, but that's just a basic understanding of genetics, and genetic entropy begins after acknowledging those things. So of course, if they're evolutionists, they're going to have to come up with rescue devices. But for me, as a creationist, I can sit back, relax, and say, wow, that data that they're coming up with is actually consistent with a biblical based model. But if you want to switch gears a little bit, because I know you're talking about design, did you want to, maybe that's something you're more comfortable with?
I mean, I don't understand. I mean, whatever, the biblical base model, whatever. I don't understand how you think science is backing that up. You and the 0.0005% of creationists like you believe that, but nobody else does.
Well, no, because like I've said, I think 4 times, population geneticists, which are evolutionary population geneticists, acknowledge the fact that we inherit 100 to 300 new mutations per person per generation. And this perfectly explains what we see, for example, in the fossil record, reductive evolution. We see it in bacteria, we see it in viruses, we see it in cheetah populations today. Genomic degradations everywhere. Mutations are not construction, they're destruction. So all the evidence for pond scum to people, bacteria to biologists, evolution is contradictory and inconsistent to the empirical data. So I understand you don't want to admit it, but for me, I'm sitting back, relaxing, thinking, wow, this is consistent with a biblical based model. I have no reason to give up the biblical based model. That's the whole point. If my starting point is creation, and yet all the evidence points to creation, a point at least entropy not only in the universe, but in the genome, as a Christian, I'm pretty confident with the data. And I've had debates, go on my channel. I have 30 debates with scientists, 4 with Jackson Wheat, who, Steve McRae, the atheist from the Non Sequitur Show, say is one of their better apologists. RJ Downer, who's written books on evolution. Scientists who actually work on the ENCODE data, and you can look at these debates, and they have no answer to this genome-wide degradation. They've got rescue devices, but they have no explanation for it. So, you know what, let the viewer be the, it's not like this is the first time I've ever, you know, brought up this fact, but there's been plenty of chances to debunk it. But at the end of the day, the evidence is not, I mean, we might just have to agree to disagree on that, but.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to, I mean, for one, you give yourself away with the pond scum evolution thing. You are proving to be exactly like Matt Powell. You are, I mean, you're like a spitting it. Are you guys brothers?
So do you agree that the evolutionary theory of universal common descent says that we all stem from a single-celled organism, possibly a bacteria, amoeba? I mean, that you must at least know, right?
That is what I've always been taught, yes.
Okay, well, there's your pond scum right there. I mean, what do you call
I call that a single-celled organism. That's not pond scum. That's a single-celled organism.
Okay, so a single-celled organism that had to come from lifeless chemicals in some warm pond. You don't like that being called pond scum? Well, I can call it bacteria.
How do you know it was in a warm pond? I never heard that before.
So where do you think that this single-celled organism, abiogenesis, which I like to differentiate from the theory of universal common descent, because I mean, universal common descent, if you just Google the tree of life, you can see at the very bottom, it's an amoeba. You can see somewhere on one of the side branches, you got some amphibian frog-looking animal. At the top, you got something like a human being. And I find it funny because if I asked you, you know, if it's a fairy tale that when a princess kisses a frog and he turns to a prince, you're going to laugh and scoff. But if I say, hey, if a frog turns to a prince through millions of years of evolutionary processes, well, suddenly that's science. Well, at the end of the day, evolutionists hide their religion within science because they're both fairy tales at the end of the day, brother. Let's get real here.
Oh, you're admitting that religion is a fairy tale?
No, I'm saying that
you just admitted religion was a fairy tale.
See, the thing is, there's religion, there's faith, but there's faith with actual evidence. We have zero evidence for evolutionary theory, and all the evidence of, because the mechanisms are mutations, natural selection. You even knew that. You told me that at the beginning. But if all we see is degradation, deterioration of a once perfect creation, that's consistent with a biblical based model. And you said that design is not all around us, but how do you not see design in this universe that we're looking at here? I mean, if you're walking through the woods and you find an arrowhead, for example, isn't it obvious that and intuitive that although it's really nothing more than rock, that because it's normal natural material, but it's been shaped and designed for a purpose? So isn't the only logical conclusion to conclude that, you know, that didn't happen through abrasion or erosion or whatever natural processes, but it was actually handled and shaped through design? I mean, isn't that a logical conclusion? Go ahead.
I don't think so at all. I mean, I don't see how you can see design in the sky. I don't see how you can see design in the universe. Do you have another universe to compare that design to make sure it was designed? You don't. You don't. All you have are these assertions and this fiction that has been spun time and time and time again. See, like I said, I'm not a genius on the particulars of evolution, but what I know, this is what I know, is that they have evidence for it. So I tend to like, all right, they have.
Can you name one evidence? Because they got a whole pile of evidence. Can you just name one then? You keep saying they have evidence. I'm giving you all this evidence for biblical creation.
All you have done is talk shit about science. You've given no evidence of biblical creation.
I've spent the last hour giving you, or half an hour.
You spent the last hour just talking shit about science, trying to disprove science. That's all you've done.
Okay, well, I'm not going to repeat what I said about population genetics, but isn't the expansion of the universe based on fine tuning and based on the first and second law of thermodynamics? Doesn't that point to a creation and point to some type of design? I understand that you said that, you know, we have no other universe to compare to, but that's not somewhat of a logical inference to you?
What are you talking about?
Well, doesn't fine tuning require a fine tuner?
I never agreed to fine tuning. I don't fucking know, dude. I mean, where is the tuner at? Why don't we see him? I mean, he would be so big that you couldn't miss him. But you never seen them. Never, ever. You've been told this from generation after generation after generation that this is the model you must come from. But there's no evidence. You asked me where the data is. I'm saying you spoke of Lucy. You spoke of the Millennial Man. You know of the fossil records. You know of the bead records we have of the modern humans coming out of Africa. You know of this. So you know of the evidence that I'm speaking of. The evidence I've never seen is that a man came back from the dead. A man brought the dead from back, to life. That a man lived to be 900, 1200, however old they say these people lived. Show me evidence of that.
Well, okay, for one, the fossil record, everything we see and based on mutation accumulation, as I've said, points to a once perfect creation, points to obviously a time where there would have been better health, longer lives. I mean, all cultures speak of a golden age. And when you talk about the out of Africa scenario, I'm not sure if you're just throwing that out there because I'm quite familiar with that. Actually, I've studied it in great detail. And what's funny about that and how they come up with that based on DNA differences in mitochondrial DNA haplogroups. What's funny is that these major haplogroups of mitochondrial DNA related to the out of Africa scenario, they're broken up into LMN. And the thing is, that's perfectly consistent with a biblical creation model because that goes right back to what? What happened after the flood? Noah's 3 sons had 3 wives, and mitochondrial DNA is inherited exclusively through mothers, through women. So the fact that there's 3 major haplogroups of human mitochondrial DNA is amazing confirmation of, once again, the biblical based model. So far there's 3 confirmations of the biblical model. So, I mean, do you want any more?
I haven't heard a confirmation of the biblical model yet.
Well, are you familiar with? Are you familiar with how they came out, how they derived the out of Africa scenario? Like, are you familiar with the data there?
We have the fossil record.
No. They're looking at DNA differences, which is a measure of time. So if you actually look at these phylogenetic trees that actually support either an out of Africa scenario or say an out of Middle East scenario, you're looking at a measure of time through mitochondrial DNA differences, which go back directly to 3 major haplogroups, which is consistent with how come evolutionists have to resort to a bottleneck in order to explain the mitochondrial haplogroups? Because all humans are 0.5% different genetically than one another. That's low genetic diversity. That's predicted under a creation model based on, say, post-flood humanity of only 8 people. So how come evolutionists have to resort to a bottleneck? This is rescue device after rescue device after rescue device with them. Do you get anything of what I just said? I'm only saying this because you brought up the out of Africa scenario. I don't like when people just throw things out there, but they don't even know anything about what they're talking about. Do you know what mitochondrial DNA is, mitochondrial DNA differences, phylogenetic trees?
I know you're spitting out a whole bunch of shit right now. That's what I know. You prove that fucking God did it. Prove that God did it. Give me your fucking proof that God did it.
So it seems like you're getting a little bit angry here that I've provided 4 direct lines of evidence for a biblical based model, and you've provided me absolutely 0 empirical evidence for an evolutionary theory.
Let me ask you this. Where is your proof that your God created mankind? Where is your proof that your God created Earth? Instead of just spitting out how the science is wrong, show me proof.
So if you want to look more to, say, fine tuning, because you said that you denied a fine tuner, where is he, you said? Well, if we look at the distance of, say, the Earth, it's perfect from the sun. And that suggests design, because if it's farther or closer, the Earth is not going to survive, and it's going to be a ripple effect, and we're not going to survive. So how is that not great testament to our creator? Now, you're going to say, well, we can't see him. Well, you know what? I'm looking at my Chevy Cruze across the street, and I've never seen who designed him. He's probably somewhere in Tokyo, halfway around the world, but I can still conclude, wow, that's obviously designed, because these things don't just come together on their own.
Same Matt Powell example. He used a sculpture. It's quite different. It's quite different. If you wanted to find out the exact designer of that car, guess what? You have the ability to do so. You can find him. If he's still living, you can go and speak to him. You cannot do that with God. You can't.
That's why we need to look, because science has to do with testable and falsifiable predictions. So if I'm going to make a hypothesis like I just did, or make a hypothesis about, say, things that are said in Genesis, we have to go get the data. And when we know that our genome is fully functional versus non-functional, which evolution predicts, and we know that mitochondrial DNA falls into 3 major haplogroups, and we know genetic entropy is a fact, we're accumulating these deleterious mutations, this is all consistent with the model. So this is the data that supports the hypotheses. You have to have data to go with it. I get what you're saying, but when I support you the empirical data to go with what I'm saying and you deny it, that just means you're a denier of the facts.
No, so what you've done is you've come in and you've denied science, and then you've tried to imply that I'm stupid for not being able to look at all these words you've memorized from the dictionary. That's what you've done since you've been here. You've supplied no data at all to give me any evidence to think that the earth is 6,000 years old, that there was a God at the beginning. Guzman's going to tell you that God's outside of space and time, so of course you're not going to see him. It's fucking stupid. It's stupid. You know, it's just idiotic. Provide the evidence. See,
well, I think it's pretty idiotic that
on the Raging Atheist and you want to try to trap me and back me into a corner when I've been nothing but honest that I'm not a fucking evolutionist. I don't understand. You know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to understand evolution. Yes, I believe in evolution. It makes more sense than a fucking God did it. That's my answer.
Let's try and refrain from the F word again, because I'm doing nothing.
You come here and you're gonna talk about me and try to treat me like I'm fucking stupid. You're gonna get the fuck word. Don't be a dick.
If you're gonna say that whales, pine trees, mice, and banana plants are related through common ancestry, you're gonna say, well, all the evidence points to that, and you can't even name one. Come on, brother. Open up Google right now while I'm talking and write evidence for evolution. I can tell you evidence for evolution: endogenous retroviruses, chromosomal 2 fusion, nested hierarchies, phylogenetic systematics, pseudogenes, genetic mistakes. Come on, brother. I know your theory and religion better than you do, but yet they've all been overturned. Junk DNA is overturned. Chromosomal fusion is a functional DNA element. Pseudogenes are functional DNA elements. All the evidence is for biblical creation. Give me one evidence for your religion. Come on.
I don't have a religion, but I'm still waiting.
You got a religion. I know your religion better than you do.
Your evidence.
Can you tell me what a nested hierarchy is?
Don't care.
Can you tell me what Aaron Rod's so-called best evidence phylogenetic systematics is? You don't know anything about your science fiction-based religion, and you want to come in here and call my?
You know, you can be a troll all you want, but I'm giving you the evidence.
Are you familiar with the so-called chromosomal 2 fusion?
Fucking God did it. Or shut up. I mean, you're not doing nothing. Matt is better at this than you.
So how come our eye itself is more complex than cameras? And yet cameras...
fucking eyeball, dude, and you see out of it. And just because it's complex does not mean that God designed that fucking eye. Show me proof God designed that eyeball. That's what I'm asking you.
So when you take a starting point, I'm gonna have to teach you a few things, I guess. When you take a starting point and have an assumption, you have to have evidence to back up the assumption. When you have the evidence to back up the assumption, like I've been showing you over and over again here, 4 direct lines of evidence,
it's coming here with
related reasons, you deny it, you're a science denier. If cameras were designed, how can you conclude that the eye, which is a billion times more complex, was not designed? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. That's
there's no basis for that conclusion. I have a designer for the camera. Show me the designer for the eye. Show it to me. I can find the designer for the camera.
See, the thing is, when we actually infer a designer, I get what you're saying. There's a ton of religions, right?
I'm not drunk.
That's why we need to go to who this designer is. And when we go to the Bible and we read what we read in Genesis, and we can infer that based on all known empirical data, that points to the truth of Genesis, there's my hypotheses being confirmed. The truth genetic entropy, 3 major haplogroups, created heterozygosity, functional DNA. I mean, this is all
you believe that the universe came from nothing. That's what you're telling me. You believe the universe came from nothing. You believe in
The
Genesis.
universe was spoken into it. If we look at the first law of thermodynamics, which says matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed, and we look at the second law of thermodynamics, which says the universe is winding down, the law of increasing entropy, if we take that back time to a point of least increasing entropy, a time of creation, there's science confirming biblical creation. Because in the Bible, the first sentence is, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That implies a time outside of creation.
Where did it come from?
Where did what come from?
The heaven and the earth. Where did it come from?
God spoke the heaven and earth into existence. It's either that or
The answer is the void. The void. It came from the void. What is the void?
You talking about Genesis?
Yes, Genesis. What is a void? What does void mean?
Where does it say? It says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void. That's because he hadn't shaped the earth at that point.
What does void mean?
Without form, or without form and void. It wasn't.
Void is nothing, dude. It's nothing. Void is
I don't get what your point is.
I'm saying that you believe the universe came from nothing.
I believe that God spoke the universe into existence from nothing. You believe the universe itself came from, for some reason, nothing at all, like no outside force.
No, we don't. Even if that point, that dense point of the universe compressed together was almost zero, standing for truth, that's still something. You think the universe came from nothing. I think the universe comes from something. That's what I'm getting at.
See, the atheists have to resort to things like the multiverse in order to. I understand you're denying, fine tuning. You're denying.
I just need proof of it, dude. I'm not denying. I don't know. I've never pretended to know. I wasn't there. Neither was you. You don't know. You're pretending to know. That's the difference.
Well, see, based on. I want to go back to what you said about, that singularity, but would you say that there was because we know if the first and the second law of thermodynamics are true, the universe is winding down. That winds back to a time of.
Dude, it's always.
I know you don't want to call it creation, but how did it all come to be?
I mean, I've read the laws of thermodynamics so much in the past 3 months that I'm seriously surprised I don't have nightmares about those stupid words, because that's all you guys say. This is the first time. Okay, if you've heard it so many times, you must have studied it. Can you tell me what the first law of thermodynamics is? Like, I hear you. That's all Matt Powell says. That's all you creationists say. Your only argument is trying to disargue science. And when you do that, you're not providing proof of your own claim. You're just trying to disprove the others. I don't know if evolution was how it happened. I've always maintained I wasn't there to see it.
Well, that's a respect. I respect you said that. You know what? That's respectable. But you keep saying that we're denying the science. But I've studied the first and second law of thermodynamics. I can go into it in more detail than just saying, hey, it means that matter and energy was neither created nor destroyed. But
these are all talking points. I mean, it's not like you're going to sit here and pretend like you understand it. The only understanding you have is the warped understanding you've been given. Now, it's just, I mean, I don't need, like, I'm going to watch this back and I'm going to go and research some of this stuff you're talking about. And I apologize for my outburst. I am frustrated, but I'm not frustrated with you. I'm not.
No, you're raging. We've already got frustrated atheists. You're raging atheists.
You have to understand how, like, if you're going to have a productive conversation, and I'm going to be honest with you and say, hey, I don't understand this thing. Don't try to sit here and say that I'm stupid for not understanding the big ass words that you memorized from a dictionary. I understand the concepts. I'm going to debate the concepts with you, but the moment that you go low with me, I'm going to go lower. So I apologize. We can move on. No problem.
Now, from here, what would you like to talk about? Because all I'm saying is, I started it off nice just to have some common ground. Hey, what do you mean by evolution? What's your definition of evolution? And then we can go into something a little more. I'm showing you why, the Bible, I understand you disagree. That's fine. And that's cool that you're going to go and listen to it. But I try and explain it in the easiest way that I can.
Instead of the scientific explanations of 18-letter words that seriously nobody understands outside of a few people. And I've read a lot of books, so I can understand words. But these words, this science jargon you're trying to bring at me is a direct attempt to throw the argument off. If you want to have a good conversation, we can. What I would like from a creationist is not to spend your time disproving evolution. Spend your time proving creation to me. That's what I want to know. If you have evidence of creation, if you have evidence of God, I want to know that. But telling me that you know the fossils is wrong and abiogenesis that and first law of thermodynamics, that's not telling me nothing but your talking points.
See, the thing is, you can take a horse to the water. You can't force him to drink. So I can give you the evidence as to why, if you have a biblical based starting point, why that's consistent. I understand that you reject it, but when you look at some of the world leading scientists of the past, and they say things like they have to look to the science with a naturalistic mindset, naturalistic perspective, and only derive their conclusions based on natural laws. And if that's the way you're looking at it as well, there's really even just me saying something like, hey, design requires a designer, right? Occam's razor, that's really I think that's the conclusion. And I understand you're going to disagree. I understand, because at the end of the day, I can't force you to believe it. There's a measure of faith given to every man, and it just depends where you put the faith.
You can spend an hour debunking the science of evolution, but you're spending an hour debunking the science of evolution is because there's data there and there's science there. There's the fossils there that you can see. You can see those. There's actual evidence. I just want evidence that God did it.
Well, but the thing is, if you're looking at all these fossils, like I was talking about, and showing you, but if all we see is reductive evolution, I'm going to try to use a little like all reductive evolution means is that it's genome degradation, and that's why they went extinct for the most part. I mean, are you saying that you're going to lose it all and then somehow we're going to gain it all? I mean, how are you going to get rich by losing a lot more money than you're getting? I mean, that's the point. Like death and decay, degeneration, that's what we expect as creationists. But that's actually what we see. So I don't understand how you're going to go from your single-celled organism to your whale based on that. I mean,
I don't understand, and you weren't there, you couldn't see it, so I'm not blaming you for not understanding it. What I'm saying is you've taken that lack of understanding and threw it out the window for something that's never been proven, something that's never existed. I mean, it's insane that you're going to dismiss the actual evidence. And I'm not saying you have to believe that. Like I said, I don't know. I wasn't there. I think that science does make conclusions. I think some of those conclusions are based on evidence and some of those are based on best guesses. I'm a naturally skeptic person. I'm not going to automatically believe, all right, I know for a fact that evolution did it because I know everything. No, I don't. I don't know everything. I'm not going to pretend to know everything. And I'm not going to base my life on something that has never been proven ever. Like just my grandmother's generation, when I was a kid, would tell me, don't say goddamn God's going to strike you down with lightning. But he never does.
No, and I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think you know what? I think a big part of the Bible then would be the Genesis flood. Then, okay, like if you could see evidence for that, then wouldn't you have to look at the Bible and say, okay, you know what? Maybe we should take this seriously. And if we go to the fossils you're talking about, and this will be void of really big I guess words here, but like, do you not see that there's evidence that the Earth was once underwater?
I think it's a technique that you're using, but you can use whatever words makes you comfortable. I will get the gist of what you're saying. I might not follow you because I think that's the technique. You can use what words you're saying. That's not the point. The point is this: it's you guys are going to come and degrade us nonstop, and then wonder why I'm the Raging Atheist. You guys are going to come here with your pond scum evolution and talk down to somebody because they're not speaking the big words that you're so familiar with all your talking points because you spend all your time in the chats trolling atheists. You pretend like the ones antagonizing you when all we're doing is saying, don't force that shit on me.
Okay,
but don't you? You just got to force it, because if everybody doesn't believe in this delusion, then it's a delusion.
See, I don't think you see how passive aggressive you are, because you said a few things at first. The conversation was flowing nicely, and then you say that, hey, I called you stupid or something. But the thing is, you say things in a passive aggressive way where it requires me to do the same. But my style is a little bit different than yours. But you say things like delusion or whatever it is. I mean, you know what? That's just as insulting. We might as well just.
I will give you that. I can see where that would be insulting. But you have to understand that when I say delusion, I'm coming from an actual place there, because you are talking to somebody that's not there. You're having prayers. You're talking to somebody that's not there. You're having faith in something that's going to help this world somehow when the world has done nothing but go to shit. I mean, I don't understand. When I say delusion, it's because it's a delusion. I'm not trying to be insulting, but I can understand how you would see that as being insulting. When you're sitting there calling me stupid, you're trying to be insulting, because
I didn't say the word stupid, but like a lot of the things, like, your delusion, like the thing is, a lot of times if you just stick with the evidence, then usually the conversation.
The evidence is there. If you're speaking to yourself.
Well, no, I'm just asking you, because instead of just going on like this rabbit trail, all I'm asking you is, you don't see that there's evidence that the Earth was once underwater. I mean, how would you explain, and I'll give you plenty of time to explain it, but like, how do you explain marine fossils on mountains and in landlocked areas that are
that's
far from the sea?
I crush Matt on that. It's natural climate change. You Christians argue natural climate, or not all of you Christians. Some Christians will argue natural climate change in opposition of man-made climate change. No, there is a natural climate change, and the waters did rise. It wasn't the world full of water. Certain parts of the world was very high water levels, and yes, they would cover mountains. At one point, Mount Everest was covered in water because of natural climate change. 50,000 years ago, the polar ice shelf slipped into the sea, raised the water levels. That was 50,000 years ago. Science has proven that, shown that. It wasn't
Now, yeah, but are you basing that on your stuff? Are you saying that you can look back in the past and actually see that your interpretation of which you just gave me is true? Verified fact?
With our dating techniques, yes, they have. But you dismiss those dating techniques.
No, I don't dismiss those dating techniques, because if you're actually looking at the rocks that they're actually dating themselves, look at the rock layers. They've got ripple marks. If you're familiar with that, that really does indicate that they were formed rapidly. Now, I think the evolutionist just says, well, yeah, certain parts of the Earth, were underwater and floods happen, and that explains the ripple marks. But the fact is, it is consistent with a global flood. Like, would that be your response to the ripple marks that indicates that rock layers were formed rapidly? Like, would that be your response?
And Matt hit me with this shit, and I told him, and I haven't researched it much since, with the whole strata tree shit.
Well, not that. I'm not talking about the tree.
Science has shown that, I think it's 4 different times, that yes, the polar ice shelf slipped into the ocean, water levels rose. Nothing supernatural about it. It wasn't God pissed off because the monkeys were masturbating. That wasn't what happened. It was natural. Science has pretty much shown that.
Okay, and with the other thing too, I don't like leaving things open-ended. And you talked about the sea level rising and falling. Well, the thing is, that would have had to happen more than 7 times. And I think that's what I'll have to look into it to know exactly. I'm pretty sure, to actually bring these fossils to the continents that you're talking about. And at the end of the day, observable science wise, it's hard enough for sea level to rise and fall once, let alone 7 times. So I think that takes faith to believe in. And those who have actually studied, I'm almost done. Those who have actually studied geology, and I'm not an expert by any means, but I've studied it a little bit, and they know that the lighter or less dense continents float on the denser mantle that's beneath them. So I debunks what you just said about the rising and falling of sea levels. So how would you explain that?
I'm not, as you said, I'm not a geologist either. I found this when I was directly researching. This is the first thing that popped up.
I've seen that.
this is the first thing that popped up when I
and
Googled.
that's why I have that same rebuttal to every. See, the thing is, when you study these, it's good to see. Like for me, I look at what the secularists are saying and see what their arguments is, and see if there's a better explanation. And usually it's the typical talking points from, because you said, our talking points. To be honest with you, when you've debated evolutionists for as much as I have, it's usually the same talking points as well. So
well, I'm sure it is, but I think you're starting to realize I'm not going by talking points. I'm just giving you what I know. And I just happened to study these seashells because of Matt Powell. And I did just happen to find this information. And I would have to ascertain that natural rising climate change sea levels is a lot more plausible than a whiny baby God mad because people are masturbating.
But the thing is, if we actually take a biblical Genesis starting point and we look for evidence for a Genesis flood, I mean, what else would you want to find? I mean, 90% of fossils that we see in the record are marine fossils. They're buried with from top to bottom.
So can you understand that primitive man is looking at a world and trying to understand it, and they're coming up with stories to understand it? And if they find like a seashell on top of a mountain, then that's going to be a story, and they're not going to be able to explain it. This is human nature. We have imaginations. We see something, we make up a story about that thing. It's what we've always done. Do you understand that?
No, I understand that, but it's not just one seashell. It's billions of seashells.
I know, it's a lot of seashells. They're all over those mountains. I mean, you can't take away from your talking point on it because they're there. But what I'm saying is it's not data of Genesis. It's not data of a God creationist theory. It's not data of that. You guys use it as data of that, and I understand why, but it just isn't. I mean, we know what happened.
Well, see, the thing is, if you notice from the beginning, I do look thoroughly into the data that is derived from a hypothesis, because if there's no data in support of the hypothesis, I agree, it falls in the category of pseudoscience. But I get everything you're saying, but that's why we need to look at what's testable and what's falsifiable. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with more of an advanced, because we're just talking about the basics here on the global flood model, but we look to continental sprint. You might be familiar with continental drift. Mm-hmm. Now, with the CPT model, that's catastrophic plate tectonics, we've hypothesized based on the model that the pre-flood ocean crust was dragged into the mantle. That's called subduction process. So this is where a testable, falsifiable prediction comes in. Hey, is this true? Has this happened? But recently it's actually been confirmed, because we would say the cold ocean crust based on this, because we know the fountains of the Great Deep broke open. There's inferences made there, but it should still be cold given our model of only, 4,000 years ago since the flood. Seismic data from NASA, and I can even provide this link as well. I provided to many atheists, and they've admitted the truth about it. And it's actually revealed enormous slabs of cool rock, just like we predicted, under North America, when down in the core itself should actually be warm. So that's confirmation of flood geology right there. So it comes down to testable and falsifiability. And like I've said, the creation model is test. I know you disagree, but there's confirmation right there.
If you start with the conclusion already, you're going to find evidence to support that conclusion, and you've admitted that. Like, you're starting from this creationist Bible theory, and then you're looking for supporting evidence. You're going to find some evidence to support that, but what you don't do is accept all the evidence that dismisses it.
Well, the thing is, it seems like you're trying to, because I provided you all the evidence that exactly what we would expect if a global flood happened, and even the rock layers, like we were talking about, sedimentary rock layers is actually stretches along all continents. So it's not just one continent or two continent; it's all continents and all marine fossils throughout every single layer. So Occam's razor, once again, the easiest explanation: the whole world was once underwater. Genesis tells us global flood. Easy conclusion for a creationist. Like, why should I give that up?
But Genesis wasn't the first thing to tell us about that global flood. I mean, plenty of gods have done it because, there has been evidence of global floods. But I mean, so you believe in the flood. So you believe in the flood story. You believe that Noah was 900 years old. Do you honestly believe that kangaroos hopped across the ocean?
Well, if I understand you're asking that question, that's a good question. Have you ever looked into creationist literature to see what our answer is to something like that?
No, I have no desire to look at creationist literature.
Okay, okay, I'll go one by one then. So for all your points, flood legends, they mirror the Genesis account. So it's a widely known phenomenon when you look at, say, a variety of legends like that, especially ones that are embellished. They come from a common source, and it's pretty agreeable among I think experts in it that the common source would have been, say, the Genesis flood. And secondly, with kangaroos, well, we would assume based on the flood and the post-flood ice age that occurred, land bridges easily could have distributed those types of species like kangaroos
a land bridge from Australia.
Well, the thing is, even the secular evolutionists would resort to land bridges to explain certain geographical distribution of species. But after the actual climate,
yeah, I mean, we have a land bridge, and that's how we explain that the Native Americans got in America, but there's no land bridge from Australia.
Well, when we're talking about the actual distribution of these, once the actual isolation took place, that's when the actual, like, for example, I think from, what is it? I think it's from Vietnam to New Guinea to Australia. I think there's the evidence. I don't know. I'd have to look at it because there's shallow seas there. So based on a post-flood ice age, and once the actual levels of water rose back up, these species are isolated in these areas such as Australia. If post-flood ice age lowered the sea levels and exposed these land bridges, and afterwards the sea levels rose again, I mean, it's pretty consistent with even the evolutionist explanation. So to be honest with you, that's
no, it's not
really
no, that's not consistent at all. There's no, I mean, do you realize how low those damn oceans would have to go for kangaroos to hop across it? I mean, you're talking. I mean, no, I've never studied this, but I can guarantee you that no, that's bullshit.
Well, you can look up the actual, because even the evolutionists would say that there was a supercontinent called Pangea.
Yeah, and I know about Pangea, and I was thinking, as you're telling me this bullshit about water's going down, why don't you just use Pangea? But you're not, and now you want to go there.
Because when they look at their continental drift, they would take that back millions of years ago and say there was a supercontinent. But there's actually evidence that it wasn't.
Exactly. Because the supercontinent goes against your creation theory. There's nothing in the Bible about one continent and God breaking those continents apart. So had you went to Pangea, I would have had you. So good thing you didn't.
Actually, the Bible talks about all the waters in one area and talks about all the land in one area. So what are you talking about? Have you not read Genesis? It talks about the fountains of the great deep breaking open, and then that would have.
It talks about the Garden of Eden. It talks about the Garden of Eden. It does not talk about one continent in the Bible.
It talks about all the land together in one place, and it talks about all the waters together in one place. What are you talking about?
I'm not going to disagree with you on that. I'll have to go back and read that. I might
because that's where we derive our hypotheses on continental sprint. And the thing is, continental sprint better explains the Himalaya mountains, and because continental drift, that slow snail-like drifting of the plates can't really explain the flood's catastrophic plate tectonics broke up the Pangea. I mean, that's better explained based on, we probably agree to disagree on that as well, but the Bible's consistent with the land all in one place and the waters all in one place.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a Pangea, it was a lot longer than 6,000 years ago.
Of course, because the evolutionists use the uniformitarian assumptions and say continental drift. But I just told you that continental sprint, fast-paced plate movement catastrophic plate tectonics, explain better the data we see with mountains, the Himalayas. Continental sprint or the drift ain't going to explain that requires catastrophic plate tectonics, and that's what we look to. I don't know why that would be a point of contention on your behalf.
Well, I mean, it's just kind of weird because most Christians stay away from Pangea, so it's kind of weird to hear you trying to embrace it. But yeah, we can move on because that's not. I'm not an expert on that. I'm not much of an expert on anything.
No, that's okay.
Except what I know. But
it's just like with evolutionists, there's not just one single hypothesis, right? There's plenty of hypotheses, and the thing is, at this point, not all creationists agree that there is one supercontinent, but so far the model based on the land's in one place, the water in one place, and the fountains of the Great Deep breaking open, that catastrophic plate tectonic model so far is stronger because of that. For example, the testable prediction that actually came forth based on NASA. So far, I personally think that's the best model. But yeah, of course, you're right. Not every creationist agrees with that. Ken Hovind would say, hey, the continents are still connected. You know what I mean? Because underwater, it's not like they're just floating like tree leaves. So at the end of the day, but yeah, if we can certainly move on from there. Actually, how long have we been going at this, brother? Because probably over an hour.
Yeah, it's over an hour. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, you know what? If you have any final questions, I think it's been over an hour. I was thinking about an hour or so would do. Do you have any final questions or any last things to say? And I think at the end of the day, we might have got heated a couple times, but I think it was fun. I've got no issues.
I do want to apologize for getting heated. I shouldn't have. It was frustration with your arguments. But I think it's more frustration. My mind's a little slow today. I am hungover, so I'm frustrated with myself for that. Here's the thing that's just so frustrating with creationists. I'm gonna have different kinds of Christian. I've talked to a lot of different kinds of Christians, and the frustrating thing with creationists is just this tendency to try to sound so smart when you're just tearing down all of science. And I understand why you guys attack science, my thing is, I don't want to get frustrated like I did, because that's not helping me. I want to understand you guys. I want to understand why you guys think the way you think. So me flipping out like that isn't helping. But I am the Raging Atheist. I was just really hoping that this would have been more productive than Matt, and I feel more frustrated than I ever did talking to Matt. So I just don't really know where I'm at. I do want to thank you for coming on, though.
Well, you know what? All I can say is, I've always been a little bit obsessed with confirming what I believe is actually true. And at the end of the day, you can look at, I've said it many times, it's not just creationists that have realized and observed. It's kind of a trade secret among population geneticists, but like I've said, I'll send you papers. I'm not just getting all this information I get a lot of this from, I'm not sure if you're familiar with NIH. Dr. John Sanford spoke there. I mean, that's the National Institute for Health. That's not a young earth creation institution. So a lot of what I'm saying here when it comes to information loss, I mean, you can even look at it in the long-term, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, the long-term Lenski experiment, he's looking at E. coli bacteria, trying to prove evolution. There's been thousands and thousands and thousands of generation, and his own data is revealing that there's adaptation that's largely accomplished through loss of information, loss of function. Like I said, all these species that we got into, Neanderthals, hobbits, that's good. You said you understood those. Mammoth populations. I mean, I think our difference is that if we're seeing genetic degeneration on all levels, and we see it in bacteria, viruses, early human populations. I mean, that's not coming from young Earth creation sources. Yeah, we're interpreting that because it's consistent with our model. But I'll send you all the information, all the papers, all the lectures on it. I mean, my goal is to use as much secular data as possible, and I am, and you're still kind of accusing me of.
Well,
But I'll send you those if you want to look into it, brother. I mean, all these things I'm saying is true. I mean, I got this paper right here: mammoth populations, carried a high genetic load, and population geneticists are coming up with mechanisms. For example, synergistic epistasis, mutation count mechanism. They're fighting hard to explain away this deleterious mutation accumulation. So this is not just young Earth creation scientists. This is a problem for evolutionists, man. Not all the problems are solved for evolution, right?
oh no, and I don't think they are. I've said that oftentimes. I still think there's many missing links. I still think there's stuff we don't know, and I also maintain I think that there's a very good chance in 100 years we'll look back and evolution will be completely wrong. That's how science works. But
And I've heard you say that, and I respected that, and that's why I wanted to come on and talk to you. That's why, like, I understand. You know what? I understand that a lot of what you might have heard, you might have assumed based on past discussions that I was getting this all right from young Earth creation literature. But a lot of what what's that? Go ahead.
I'll look at your information if you send it to me. It is possible that I'm like I said, people know who you are, so I was quite warned about going into this conversation with you. So maybe I had that going into it, but I just get I get frustrated. It really seems to me that you guys and I know Matt Powell did the same thing. He would make it a point. I'm getting this from secular sources. What we don't care if you can get it from secular sources. What we care about is the representation, making sure you're representing it accurately and not making it fit your narrative. I'm not saying that's what you're doing. That's definitely what Matt Powell does, and that's definitely what a lot of creationists do. And you yourself admit that you're starting with you're starting from that creationist point, looking for evidence to fill that, and that is the only way you can really do it. That's science. That scientists are doing the same thing. They come up with a theory and then they look for evidence to either prove or disprove that theory. But you're not trying to disprove. You're only trying to prove. That would be the difference. You say that there's differences between us. The only difference between us is that I'm not afraid to say I don't know, and you're saying that you do. That is the difference.
And I understand what you're saying. I think, I'd have to say we all have starting points. Evolutionists have evolutionary starting points, just like when you brought up the out of Africa scenario. You know what? If you have an evolutionary starting point, you're going to have to conclude, there was some type of bottleneck that explains the low genetic diversity. But with us and our starting point, we would expect
a record that shows humans coming out of Africa. I mean, maybe there's other models that I don't know about, other theories, but from the evidence I saw, we have pretty staunch evidence that humans came out of Africa. Humans were a melting pot of creation, and that would support your guys' creation theory. Adam and Eve, or the Garden of Eden, scientists that are looking for it, that believe in it, have said that they think they found it in Africa. You should be embracing Africa, but you guys don't. Your natural instinct is to dismiss the science.
Well, what I'm saying is the Middle East, for example, the Tower of Babel, where this dispersion of for example, in these trees, they're looking at the DNA differences. Those go back to, like, you can see that the hub of genetic diversity is within. I'm not disagreeing with that. Within out of Africa and close to Middle East. So, for various reasons that it'll just be a rabbit trail and will go on forever. It could be either. But yeah, like you said, it's consistent with the biblical model. But what's most important is that all these people groups go back to three major mitochondrial people groups. And that's exactly what we'd expect reading Genesis, because Noah's 3 daughters-in-law. And if it's only inherited from women, I mean, that's pretty, I understand you want to, deny it or reject it, but that's pretty amazing confirmation to me that, wow, maybe we should look at this Genesis account and look at the genetic data and conclude, maybe this Genesis account is accurate, is all I'm saying.
I'll be open to it. Like I said, if you have any information you want to send it to me, you can, and I'll definitely look at it. I want to learn. I like you said, I do try to go out of my way to know truth. If the things that I'm saying aren't true, and I've told my audience this, I want to know so I can make it right. And I don't want to start another debate. I know we're almost at an hour and a half. You got to go. I'm going to talk to my audience for a little while after you go. But I mean, science is pretty. We have disproven that we could come from two people 6,000 years ago. Let
How
alone
have you disproven that?
Dude, I've just been reading these reports. I'm telling you, I've been reading these reports for about a year now. So I'm not going to give you the details. I know this data is out there. You can find it. It's very easy to find it because it's been everywhere for a year. But they've disproven that there's no way the population of the Earth came from two people 6,000 years ago, let alone what you're saying right now. But that, you're asking me to look into it. I'm saying you can look into that, but it is getting late, and I know you want to take off. I do want to thank you for coming on and having the conversation, sticking through when I was cussing.
I just wanted
because I think that shows some character, and I just want to point that out, that I do appreciate that. Unlike some evolution false, you did take my barrage, you took it on the chin, and then you stuck with your talking points. So I give you props on that.
Okay, man. You know what? Thanks for actually, I'm a sucker for not allowing things to be left open-ended like that. You know what? I understand the use, because I've looked at the genetic data of what you're saying about it being impossible coming from two people. But like I said before, what we see among people groups is low genetic diversity. We see one Y chromosome, indicating we came from one male. We see one mitochondrial DNA ancestry, and we see most genes come in two versions. So that actually directly points to Adam and Eve. So I'll look into what you're saying, but for what I've seen, I mean, that's pretty consistent with. I just wanted to say that last point.
Because I am interested in the science, and I do think that if there is science out there that says that, I want to know about that. So yeah, I'll look at that because I'm interested in that. If they do have some, if there's evidence, and I even told this to Matt Powell last time he called me, if there's evidence for God, I'll believe in him. But then I need to see what kind of a God he is, because if he's the God of your Bible, I couldn't follow him. But if there's evidence that maybe, what you're saying right now, if there's actual evidence and I find it, then I'm going to have to look at that. So, I mean, I do try to do that. I want to be a man of truth. I'm about the truth here. So yeah, I mean, I'm always open to information, and if you send it to me and I don't think that it's legitimate, I'll let you know.
Awesome. You know what? Thanks for having me on. You know what? At the end of the day, sure, there might have been some heated moments, but I had fun. Maybe we'll do it again one day. You can send me some stuff. I'll send you some stuff, and hopefully we can look at it with an open mind. So thanks for having me on, and we'll talk to you another time, man.
All right. Talk to you later. All right, so he's gone. Wow, I told myself I wasn't gonna get heated on him because I had been warned by a lot of people that I was gonna get exactly what I got. I could have really looked at his videos and tried to study. Had I known that he was gonna try to be so technical with his jargon, I probably would have. But man, I don't think they understand how frustrating it gets when all they're doing is spending 90% of their argument trying to dismiss the science or trying to disprove the science. You're never going to convince me that you know more than the scientists do. You're never going to convince me that you have the information that they don't have. Because if you did, you wouldn't be on the Raging Atheist talking about it. I do commend him for because I probably gave it to him worse than I even gave it to Evolution False, because he was being disrespectful. He was coming in with a bunch of shit that I understood what he was saying, but the words were really throwing me off from following what he was saying, if you can understand that. Like, I understood it, but the words were just sticking in my head, and like, what this dude, it just seemed like a strategy, and I'm sure that is his strategy. I want to see what you guys are thinking and talking about. So we're going to spend some time, and I'm going to try to see what you guys have been saying. Jesus is Lord is here, so I tried to disprove the Bible and failed miserably. See, Jesus is Lord. That's my problem. Is I can fail. I can disprove the Bible too easily. You know, if I wanted to, I might be able to disprove evolution easily. To sit there and say that you can't disprove the Bible is showing just a deep willing to tell a lie. I mean, you're lying there. If the Bible wasn't possible to be able to be proven wrong, if it was infallible like that, there wouldn't be any atheists. So the devil has deceived. I know Raw Matt came here with standing, but from what I've noticed, it seems like most of the chat was respectful. Faith level is over 9,000. Let's see if we can falsify this science. Yeah, that's the whole argument. And you just lose me if you're going to spend your time. When you spend your time talking about how science is wrong and you're not spending your time talking about how Genesis is right, you lost me. I want you to prove to me that your creation theory is right. I don't want you to prove to me that evolution is wrong. Prove to me creationism is right. Because I don't know about fucking evolution. I wasn't there. I believe what I've seen of it, and I believe that they have a shit ton of data that I haven't seen. And God doesn't have that. Religion, Christianity, Islam doesn't have that data to support their claim. I'm going to go with the data, but who the fuck am I? I'm the Raging Atheist. My opinion ultimately doesn't matter. But obviously it does to these people because they want to portray me as some fucking expert. No. If you want to have a conversation about books, I will say that I am an expert on books. But that's going to depend on the type of book, isn't it? You know, I can be an expert on J.R.R. Tolkien and not know shit about Danielle Steele. So that's pretty much his trap. Is he's going to have all these big worded talking points that he's admitted he's used it on evolutionists after evolutionists, scientists after scientists. They can't answer it. Why can't you? For one, I don't believe that they couldn't answer it. I believe you didn't accept their answer. You know, give me proof of what you're saying. Stop talking about what they're saying. That's my point. And that's what was getting me just angry at them, is you're going to sit here and call me stupid when all you're doing is trying to distract from the argument that there is no evidence for your creation story. That's all you're doing. Gluten-free. King James revised the Bible to fit current societal morals of the time. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with why King James changed the Bible. I do know that King James was gay, and so the thing that I do know is that the Bible has been changed so many times. I mean, we do know this, and they often do change it to help themselves. I'm sure King James saw some benefit to his rule from changing the Bible. And understand that. Like, understand that the Genesis that you say you have proven to me when you didn't, that story's been changed so many times that the story you're proving isn't even the story anymore. It's not even the story anymore. Guzman, your parents let you stay up this late? You're 12, dog. You should be in bed. Man, I do feel bad. Like I told my goal going in tonight was not to have that Raging Atheist moment. You know, my goal is I really want to have respectful debates. I want to be able to get people on here to have these conversations, and I'm not going to do it if I'm like, fuck you. You fucking suck. So failed on that goal. I'm going to blame my hangover because Yeah, I got lit last night. You guys saw. And Guzman, I'm not drunk tonight. I'm hungover. You're too young to understand the difference. That's another rabbit hole. Yeah, guys, I don't know. Like I don't think I was ready for this conversation tonight. I'm gonna admit it. I'm just gonna admit it. Maybe I should have put this off to when I didn't feel so shitty. But I don't know. It is a good look into the worldview. It is. It is. I did make that Christian get mad, and I did make him bite back. And that show that, like, they get mad when they can't convince you of this worldview. And dude, you're not going to convince me of this worldview, not without evidence. Give me evidence, and then yes, I'll admit, if you have absolute evidence, undeniable evidence, I'll admit there's a God. Then let's talk about what type of God he is. The Raging Atheist, can you open it up? Can I open what up? I missed what you asked. Can I open what up? Yes, there would. Non sequitur. Who are you talking to, Jill? See, this is the bad thing. I need to get used to looking at this chat, but it's hard. Like, and this is probably why people have people doing this shit, right? Because it's really hard to stay involved in the conversation. A couple of times he lost me because of the words he was using, but also because I'm trying to pay attention to the chat. So then I start typing and he's going on and then I'm not listening to him. So this is going to be a work in progress. And so, yeah, maybe my rule during debates is I'll try to avoid the chat. And then, I don't know, because I do want to start doing some post-debate analyzing. There's maybe you guys have seen him, Darth Killer, in the comments. Sent me this really long, really in-depth, really fucking awesome email about one of the debates I had, just breaking it down, what I did right, what I did wrong. And, and this dude is smart. He knows what he's talking about. So he's in Paris. There's going to be a time zone, but I really want to start getting with him, maybe have him analyze my debates with me live. And I think this will be a way for me to get better. And yeah, I did kind of walk myself into a trap here because I said that I didn't really want to debate another creationist until I studied the creation arguments more. Because this abiogenesis shit, never heard of it. The degrading genome, I had studied the degrading genome, and if I really wanted to banter with him, I would have called him out on that. I probably should have, but I just don't feel confident enough in my knowledge of the genome to go against that yet. But it's pretty much just bunk science. It's just bunk science from what I've seen. But I didn't want to go at him because he's using, like, he obviously knows these talking points. So if you're going to go at him, you better know what the hell you're talking about. And I'm not there yet. And that's one thing about me. Hopefully you guys can appreciate that, is I'm not going to say I know a thing if I don't. I know Jill and Evolution False is in the chat talking about how stupid I am. Stupid would be to try to pretend to know something. That's stupid to me. Being smart enough to know you don't know, I'll take that. It's bullshit. I agree, Atheist Rationale. I do want to thank Atheist Rationale for being up in the chat. If you guys didn't see that conversation we had earlier, I thought it was a really good conversation. Chubbs is in the chat. Free Spirit's still here. Athena, all you guys are, I'm really digging your guys' support. Yeah, man, I knew I was going into a conversation with the troll tonight. I did see comments commenting on, this is a troll, this guy's a troll. Yeah, standing for truth. I didn't know he had a channel. All I knew him was the troll. Like, I saw him trolling Skylar, and I was like, man, this dude was the one that was emailing me in August, wanting to talk to me. This is a troll that goes and talks to a lot of people. So obviously he saw something in me that he felt like he wanted to attack back then, even when I was super, super, super small. We're talking like a 100, maybe 200 subscribers. So I don't know. I think that I'm going to say ultimately I lost this debate, guys. And not because he was brilliant in his rhetoric and his arguments. I lost this debate because I didn't do what I wanted to coming into it. And that was not lose my cool with the stupid shit. And I lost my cool anyway. But then, you know, I am the Raging Atheist. This is probably going to happen a lot. I'm going to tell myself, don't lose your cool. And then I'm going to get in here and be like, fuck you. Let's hope that doesn't happen with the conversation I'm going to have with Pastor Wilson. He does seem really respectful, which, you know, standing for truth was really respectful until we started actually talking. And he can try to say that he wasn't being disrespectful or that my use of the term delusional is disrespectful. But again, I have to stress that my use of the term delusional is accurate. You know, and I think that even religious people would agree that if you're talking to yourself, that's delusional. That's a sign of shit's not all right up there. It's only okay, though, when you're talking to God. No, it's delusional. It's delusional. He's not there. He's not there. And if there is a God there, he doesn't fucking care. He doesn't care. He doesn't care if you're down here talking about him. Because that's a human thing. That couldn't be a God of the universe thing. That being could not be that petty. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. Oh, nope, you were right on point. Thank you, Blood Wolf Moon. I feel like he was trying to, you know, I don't think that I'm stupid. I think that I have a very good intellect. I think I've read more books than most people. But it just seemed to me that it was a strategy, that's his strategy to win debates. And dude, if that's going to be your strategy to win debates, you're only winning debates because that strategy is not going to make you change any minds. You know, you're not proving your point. You're only disproving, and not even really disproving the points. You're just trying to make it seem like those points are disproven. You know, when he talks about the fossil record coming out of Africa, notice how his story changed a little bit, because he went from knocking my out of Africa scenario to embracing my out of Africa scenario. Feminazi, of course, only a fucking fundamental Christian is going to call a strong-minded woman a feminazi. That's because you're weak-minded men, Joe. That's because you're weak-minded men. All right, guys, I'm going to get off of here. It is almost 12 o'clock. I'm going to go see if my daughter and her friend are in there sleeping or if they're watching videos. They've been really quiet, not picking them up on the headphones, so hopefully they're sleeping. I want to thank you guys for coming and sharing this maddening experience with me. Tomorrow, I will not be hungover. That'll be a good thing. And who am I talking to tomorrow? Tomorrow, I've got Pastor Wilson at 5 p.m. And it looks like Sunday, this one guy, you guys might have seen him in the comments. He's going to come on and talk to me. And I think I'm working on maybe somebody else for Sunday as well. I'm going to get out another video tonight. I'm going to start uploading that right now. Hopefully it'll come out. It'll be done before I'm ready to go to bed. But that'll be the second Brett Keane video. And I am going to put out Earl. Check out Earl this weekend, guys. And let me know if you think it's stupid. And if you think it's stupid, tell me it's stupid, because I'm back and forth on whether it's stupid. Oh, thank you, Blood Wolf. I'm going to get better at this. And I think one of the ways to get better at this is to analyze the debates. So, you know, I don't want to copy Skylar. I realized that, you know, I was naming a conversation with, and I'm like, holy shit, that's what Skylar Fiction does. And then Skylar Fiction comes on and analyzes his debates. So I don't want to be copying Skylar Fiction, but I want to make myself better. So we're going to have to analyze these debates. But what I want to do, instead of analyzing the debates myself, is get maybe one of you guys, get Darth Killer or one of you guys to come on and help me analyze my debates with me. I think that would be an awesome, different type of thing. So, yeah, I'm not sure if I'll try to analyze this one. because this one was just a frustrating shit. I won't consider this a debate. This digressed to yelling very quickly, which is something I've got to work on. But I'll show that, Jill. I am going to get off here. Dude, feminazi, man. Like, seriously. These are the terms I'm talking about. You can disagree with her without calling her a disrespectful fucking term. And then wonder why we get fucking rude back. You know, why, Raging Atheist, why are you the Raging Atheist? Why are you so mean to Christians? Tell me what's more mean. Me saying, fuck you, standing for truth, or people like standing for truth burning us to death. I think that's a little more rude. So if I'm going to be rude to you, that's more than what you did for us. I wished you would have been rude to them atheists you guys burned way back in the day. Is Evolution False still here? Evolution False, I think you got a man crush on me. Are you a Christian, Evolution False, or are you in the closet and you need some Raging Atheist in your life? Because if you need some Raging Atheist in your life, dude, I'm a straight guy, but I have a doppelganger. And guess what? He's gay. And I know him, and he lives right here in my same town. Looks almost just like me, but he's flaming gay. So I can hook you up, Evolution False. I can hook you up. Oh, thank you. Who burned me? Jesus is Lord. Oh, I don't know. I've been burned a lot, dude. I've been burned a lot. But you know, who never burned me? God. I don't know. I haven't seen Evolution. I just seen somebody mention them. Yeah. Atheist rationale. I think you're starting to see why we told you don't want to talk to Evolution False. MP disorder. I thought the Christian was mental. You thought that Jesus standing for truth is mental? I don't understand what you're saying, Jill. Maybe you can tell me next time, because I am going to get off of here. I'm going to, I don't know, probably go to sleep after I upload the video. Thank you guys for joining me. Oh, I did just hear my daughter. They're still awake, so I'm going to go see what they're doing. You guys have a great night, and yeah, I'll have another video up soon. Peace out.